Hello there, this is Matthew of Luminous Beings Books, and I am here with another edition of Shadow Font. I just watched right now to refresh myself a clip, promotional clip from StarWars.com. It's Luke's internal struggle, and it's from their special features. And I had seen it the other day because I went ahead and went through all the special features before. And I also listened to the audiobook of The Last Jedi. It's Last Jedi all the time over here right now. Anyway, that's not actually true. I listened to the book, I watched the movie and the special features, and I'm kind of done for a while. But I'll surely go back to it. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about right now is Rian Johnson and the Last Jedi book, which had input from him, as I recall, have presented us, the Star Wars, whatever, there's now like a new understanding of the Force. And something that was interesting is that Snoke himself in the book talks about, and there's other mention, I think, with Luke about the cosmic Force. And especially when Luke was reaching out and reconnecting to the Force, which is described in a really great way. Good job, Jason Fry, author of The Last Jedi book, or novelization, whatever. Anyway, he describes it really interestingly and says that the cosmic Force, which is this other element, there's the living Force, which is what emanates from all living beings, even rocks and whatnot, I guess, too, if you listen to Yoda on Empire, or Empire Strikes Back. But that's just, like, natural. But, and that comes from and connects all life together. And then there's the living Force, or no, I'm sorry, then there's the cosmic Force, which has a will. And we've heard the will of the Force if we watched Star Wars before, and yeah, I think that was more emphasized or spoken about in like the Phantom Menace and in the prequels, really than anything else. But you know, we've heard the phrase "the will of the Force," so that means the Force has a will. And eventually, the cosmology was evolved over time because Lucas really was making a lot of stuff up as he went along. Which, you know, I just completed a writing project, and I totally understand now why you would just make things up as you go along. So, anyway, interesting. And it was on a short story, not something big. So, anyway, I think I get it. I would like for projects to be more planned out, and I feel like if I was a professional writer just writing to make money, or, you know, making my livelihood off of writing, I would do that. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so I think it's been illy deformed. I think in the Legends books there was a woman, or there was this woman that was like this Force goddess or whatever. That was like a manifestation of the will of the Force. And then also Lucas showed us the in the Mortis trilogy, and the folks from Mortis just made an appearance in Star Wars Rebels, that there are these greater Force beings that exist, and they have something to do with what's going on in the galaxy. But my real point is that I'm frustrated by something that Snoke and Rian Johnson, through the words of Snoke and Rian Johnson, that has been added to how we should understand the Force. Luke and Snoke both talk about powerful light, powerful darkness. And also that as Kylo Ren grew in the dark side of the Force, that darkness would rise and light to meet it. And here's the thing. When it... the little section of the documentary in the special features is called Balance of the Force. And that's kind of where I'm struggling. I've struggled for a long time with fans' interpretation of what the balance of the Force is. Many fans have thought, in my opinion, erroneously, that when Vader wiped out all the Jedi and then killed the Emperor and then himself, you know, which happened over the course of 20-some years, and then it was just Luke left and he was a fledgling Jedi Knight, that was the balancing of the Force. That for too long, the light side had radiated and there was not a great power in the dark side to countervene or countermand it. So I guess you could also envision a world where there's a balance of the Force according to these people and their understanding of the Force, that there are hundreds of Jedi and there are hundreds of dark side users, or hundreds of people using the Force and serving the light or whatever, and their counterparts serving the dark side and or utilizing it, I guess, because they don't really serve the dark side, do they? They make it to serve them anyway. And I thought that was wrong because that seems dumb and incorrect. Sorry if that's your opinion about what the balance of the Force is. And then there was another theory that I heard, or way of looking at it, that made a lot of more sense to me. That, our bodies are these closed systems, and there's thinking that if everything is healthy and in proper alignment, or if everything's in proper alignment and balance as far as like nutrition and your and everything inside you, that you will be healthy and strong, or at least not weak and hurt. I go to the chiropractor. I'm a fan of that. And when your bones are out of alignment, when your back's out of alignment, things can hurt. And, you're technically off balance because, things are askew. And then when you are adjusted and everything's lined up again in its way, then the balance is restored and you feel better. Also, like a storm. Well, anyway, I don't need to keep going on about that. But so like there are examples of closed systems that when things are out of balance, it's unhealthy and it's not really easy for thriving to happen, or for life to happen in a peaceful, happy way. And I like that idea that the Force wants to be in balance. So when Snoke said, as Kylo Ren grew in his dark side power, a powerful light would come to me, I thought it would be Skywalker, not you, Rey Rocklifter. That's my name. I think Rocklifter should be her last name. I'm going to petition for that. Anyway. That makes sense to me, that the Force is imbalanced by someone warping it by use of the dark side to call all this power to themselves, and that a servant of the light would rise up or be chosen or whatever to neutralize this threat, however, by either redeeming them and getting them to, relinquish their power, their stranglehold on the Force, or, by killing them if they have to, I guess. So that sounds great to me. But according to Snoke and Ryan Johnson, Snoke's plan was to corrupt Ben Skywalker. Here, I'm going deep spoilers for everything. Snoke's plan was to corrupt Ben Skywalker and taint him with the dark side, maybe mess with his mind. We don't really know how specifically he did it. So that everybody would be afraid that Ben was going to turn into Vader, and that Leia and Han would push for him to go and learn from Luke. And that somehow Snoke knew that Luke would gather a bunch of other Padawans too, because there was like 12 of them, and then Ben and him, I think. And Luke apparently had not rebuilt the Jedi Order at all at that point. He had completely decided that the Jedi... He'd kind of like walked away from everything. I don't know what he was doing. Was he just like... what was he doing? Was he like a librarian? I guess he was probably hunting down the Jedi relics. But he decided to not... exert the Force on the galaxy, I guess, and him doing that, him cloistering himself and staying quiet, caused there to be no great rising of the dark side, except for the fact that Snoke is a super powerful dark side user, and he was out in the far reaches of space, and he was, I would assume, growing stronger over time as well. So that kind of doesn't make sense to me. But that doesn't make sense, because if the balance of the Force was restored when Vader chucked the Emperor to his death, and then he himself died, and there was all this light, then wasn't Snoke... When did Snoke start to become strong in the dark side of the Force? Because he seems like a very old being, and like he's been doing these things for years. And I know there's reference to him in books. Maybe I'll ask the Alex at Star Wars Explained if he thinks I'm full of it with this little analysis of how I think things are kind of messed up or being misrepresented. But yeah, so basically, there being Jedi enabled the dark side to grow rapidly. But wait, Ben killed a bunch of Jedi. He murdered like maybe 10 or 8 people, and then he took like 4 of them with him, and they all joined the dark side too. And Snoke was a dark side user as well. So like, how does that make sense? And maybe they're all still active and full of darkness, and that's why Rey is able to be opened up to the Force so quickly and easily, and is chosen by the Force for that purpose. I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't really make sense. So I guess I was talking to my wife about this, and I said to her, hey, listen to me. This is what, Snoke said. This is what Rian Johnson said, that by walking away and by disconnecting from the Force and by not, like by listening to what Yoda said and not going and helping his friends because he could jeopardize all their whatever, like by not choosing to be active, he was doing the wrong thing. Now, here's the confusing thing. In the deleted scene from the movie, which is included in the book in Jason Fry's expanded edition of The Last Jedi, Luke tells Rey about this band of marauders that's going to attack this peaceful village of the caretakers down below, because they're up high on the steps or whatever, or on a whatever. He tells them that they're going to do this, and he says to her, like, that anger that you feel, that drive to go do something, a true Jedi would say you can't do that unless you can maintain balance and not, lose yourself to feeling aggressive or whatever. And then he said, and besides, are you going to be here in a month when they come to raid them again? Because they come every month. And she rashly runs off, and he's, no, Rey, don't. And he gets to her finally after she realizes that it's a party between the men who were like fishermen or whatever of the caretakers, and then the women who work on the island and stay there and stuff. Which, by the way, at the end of the book, there's an epilogue, and it's cool. It talks about whatever their race is called. It gives them a name, the caretakers, and it like names a few of them, and like the head matron and stuff. And it sounds like a really cool society of these caretaker, non-religious type people. Anyway, so this is another plug for the book. You should definitely check it out. But Luke tells her, you are what the Resistance needs, or the rebellion, or whatever. I can't remember if he started calling it a rebellion at that point or not. But he said, like, your will to act and to do good and to, bravely take on these odds is what the Resistance needs, not the Jedi. So... But then Luke changes his mind and he wants to go help her. And it's really cool. In the book, they like make it super clear that he wants to go help her. And he's imagining that he'll be getting into the Falcon and going off and facing Ben. But that's when he walks in on them holding hands or touching hands and blows the roof off and everything. And so anyway, that complicates things. But my point is, I talked to my wife about this and I said, hey, so, check this out. They're basically saying... Johnson and The Last Jedi novelization, what's in them is saying that there can never really be peace in the galaxy and there be Jedi, like an active Jedi Order, because every time the Jedi Order grows in ranks, grows in number, power, whatever, and like they are good people who are trying to do what's right and preserve life and preserve peace, the will of the Force, the cosmic Force, will purposely choose to upset that peaceful existence, peaceful order, and I'm into the decentralization of power, and there not being power concentrated in large governments or groups or whatever, so that human rights can be better respected and things like that. And I'm big into the Constitution. I recently came to this knowledge that there is a way to look at the Constitution that it doesn't empower the government to do certain things. All the Constitution is about is restricting the government from doing certain things to people, and that the citizens are with whom the power rests, and that everything in the Constitution is like chains that bind the government from acting against the people. And it's the people's rights that are supreme, and the state borrows power from the people in order to do certain things. So I'm all for decentralization of power, and I think a better way to, like how I would have done it, is I wouldn't have said that every time that like basically God. I don't believe God is cruel though, and I believe in God, and that's a whole another mess to go into. But I'm a person of faith. I have faith. I believe in God, and I choose to live a certain way for myself, and I try to instill it in my children, because I think that's the right thing to do. If you believe in something, you should encourage others to believe it as well, if you can. And anyway, I don't believe God is cruel. And the cosmic force basically sounds to me like the Star Wars version of God. And Ryan Johnson, who I don't know anything about as a person, sounds like he has decided to turn the Force into a cruel and unjust God, and that, or supreme divinity, whatever, divine entity, and it sounds like Lucasfilm is okay with that. I'm surprised by that. I hope that there are developments later on that will retcon this so that that's not the case, but it sounds really terrible to me, and it kind of makes me sad. And I believe in God. I know there's suffering in the world going on more than what happened to this stupid or silly space opera, but it kind of sucks because Lucas wanted this to be like a moral thing, to replace myth, and he was a secular guy or whatever. Or I don't really know his personal life either, but he seems like he's not a religious fellow, which I'm okay with. Secular people, just be kind, be good. Anyway, but he seemed like he had a good message, that he wanted to make this cool, fun space fantasy opera thing that would inculcate or represent or show characters who were moral and good and just, and who acted selflessly. And that's kind of the main point. The Jedi represent selflessness, and the Sith or the dark side represents selfishness. And I think that can still happen while not having the Force be this cruel God who wants their it's weird. It's like a zero-sum game. It's there either has to be one weak Jedi and one weak person on the light and dark, and they're against each other, or legions of light and dark people and they're against each other, or something like that. And it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's true that life is a balancing act, and there's homeostasis, and there's things that offset each other all the time, but it's like a natural consequence, and there's not there's not necessarily someone directing it all to go that way, even though I believe in absolute. Anyway, it's just a struggle I have, and to hear definitively stated from this source, from Star Wars, from Johnson and from the book, that the Force chose to, when Luke got all these people to be trying to. Here's the thing: Jedi are selfless, and that's healthy, and where they strayed, where they erred, was in, I think it was actually in aligning themselves with the government and being so deeply enmeshed in the Republic, and refusing, for political reasons. It's explained in books, and I think alluded to in the Clone Wars. For political reasons, the Jedi would choose to not help people because they weren't allied with the Republic, and they weren't separatists. Maybe they were independent, but they, because they weren't allies, and because they weren't going to make an alliance with them, they would turn a cold shoulder to them, which I think that's wrong. Rey saying screw it, forget these. I think she says to hell with those old books, because Luke tells her those books would tell you shouldn't go, and she said I'm going to go anyway. By the way, I can say that word because Maleficent says it in an old Disney movie. Okay. Anyway, that seems to be to do the right thing at the right time, even though it's inconvenient or hard, makes sense to me. Just to get super political, we shouldn't let all these refugees in because they're going to destroy our country. Well, but we started the wars and we're causing the conflict. Why not take these people in? And if somebody gets hurt because of us doing kindness, we'll deal with the consequences of that then. Do I want that to be my kid? No. Do I want it to be your kid? No. I don't want it to be anyone's kid who gets hurt because a refugee comes in. But I don't know. Even statistically, you can look at Cato Institute for information on this. Immigrants and refugees are not high crime individuals because they're having such a better life. Or whatever. There's probably a complex web of reasons why they're not, but they're not these, terrors that we have to guard ourselves from. So anyway, there you go. Last Jedi book, Snoke's words, Luke's words a little bit. Ryan Johnson talking about the balance of the Force and the the cosmic force. He kind of turns it into a cruel god, and that's really upsetting to me, and I wish he didn't do that. And that's not something I would do in my fiction. And that's kind of what this whole Shadow Font show is about, talking about interpreting and taking in fiction of others. And how it will affect my work. So there you go. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. If you enjoyed this kind of ranty thing about Star Wars and whatever, you can go ahead and give me a thumbs up. You can also subscribe. And once you subscribe, you can ring that notification bell to get a notice of every darn time I release one of these episodes. So thank you for your time once again, and be well.